So what are we going to look into today? The contents for today: output lists, basic functions. We also look at the responsive design for myresult.com. We will have a look at the auto rank feature, at the split selector, the record multiplier, and then we will also look at statistics. Let's start with the basic functions. Output lists, as we will see in a bit, can be set up in different ways. And where you set them up is under data format. And let's jump right into the software. We have a test event, which is the Duckburg 10K. Some of you may know that event already, but that doesn't matter for today. So we are here in the output window and then under lists. Give me a second. Okay, so we are under output lists, and now we will start from scratch because I want to show you how to set up your lists. So we start with data format because at the moment, if we look at the view, our list is empty. For every list, in the end, it doesn't matter if it is a participant list, if it is a result list, if it is a kind of statistics set, because you can also build your own statistics, not using the dedicated statistics, but also using a list. They all have a grouping and a sorting. They all consist of fields and columns, and then there is a filter. But we will start with the fields and columns for now. So every line here represents one column actually in the list later on. So you can enter any data that you want to show. This can also be an expression. We looked at expressions last week. And when you click in that field, the field wizard will open, so you can select from any field that is available. So I will start with BIP. And what you see then as well is that the column heading or the header will automatically be pulled from the data. That does work for fields, but it does not work for fields that contain the dot logic. So if I would write country.ioc, then that will not work. So whenever the software sees that there's a dot or an expression or brackets, it will not pull the column heading automatically. Of course, you can always override it or give your own column heading. Same here for BIP. You can, of course, change that to BIP number. And for those that work with different languages, here, as you know from many parts of the software, you can also define the column header in different languages. Obviously, the data should be, or usually is, doesn't depend on the language. But if it does depend on the language, you can use the text function. You can search the knowledge base for it, just in case it is relevant for you, if you need to show a data field in different languages. But yeah, all you need to know here is that under data, you enter what you want to show. And I can't really tell you what to show because there's no right or wrong. So in the end, it's all up to you what you want to show, how your list should look like. You can also define a bit the style of the list. So you can define the alignment of data within a column. And you can also define multi-line lists. Multi-line lists can make sense if you have to show quite a lot of data. But in general, especially for lists that are published on myresult.com, we say keep the number of information, the number of columns as low as possible, because sometimes it is simply overwhelming to see a ton of data and you can't really make sense of it. Okay, But for now, we will start with bib, and then we will use first last name, country dot name, country dot flag, club, and that way we would have our participant list. We have all aligned to the left. We all have in the first line, we want to show the first last name bold. And now let's have a look at the view, how that would look like. So here we have 22 participants in our event file, in our Duckburg 10K, and we see that they are sorted by bib number. We will look at the sorting in a few minutes, but by default, if there's nothing set, it will always sort by bib number. We see the first last name is bold. The country name is, let's write it in English, country.name.en. We have the country flag and we have the club name. So what would happen if I create a multi-line output list? So let's say the country name and the country flag, they go into line 2. And what the software does, it reads from top to bottom and then from left to right. So it will first check, okay, what do I need to show in line 1? Okay, this is the first item in line 1. So this is the left column because we have 3 items in line 1 or 3 columns. So this is the left column, this is the middle column, this is the right column. For the second line, it will then again start with the left, where the column furthest to the left. So now we will have our bib number, first last name, and the club in the first line. And in the second line, for each participant, we have the country and the country flag. But now we might not want to have the country name under the bib number. So we go into the extended settings. And here we can define a column offset. And if I define that column offset, it will apply to this field. So this one would not start at the furthest to the left, but it will kind of jump over the first column. I would set to 9. Of course, it would respect that. So if I set the column offset to 1, then this one would be blank. And that way I can really design my multi-line lists depending on the content that I want to or that I need to show, and to make it look quite nice. What else do we have in the extended settings? We can define a second column heading. Let's simply do it so you see what happens. Let's say number, and here we change it to simply show bib number and number. And then it will add another column heading. To be honest, I can't give you an example where that might make sense. But again, there's no wrong or right. And when you need it, there you will find the functionality. You can define a color. So let's take red. Quite obvious, the color is the font color. You can also define a dynamic formatting. So the dynamic formatting allows you to set different things. So I will search for dynamic formatting because I myself always need to check what's possible. So with the dynamic formatting, you can, based on data, you can format the content in, for example, bold, italic, underline, strike through, align left, align center, align right, or define the font color, the background color, the outline text color, and the outline width. So that way you can, especially for an announcer, make him highlight women in pink and man in blue, for example. That is the easiest example that we can always give here, because that's much easier to recognize for someone who sees a lot of data than to look out for a column where it says male or female. If you see a color, that is much easier. And how does the dynamic formatting work? So you can enter a formula if most often. So if sex or if gender equals F for female, then use an italic formatting. Otherwise, use no special formatting. So use the default. Or what we can do right now. So if a field is formatted with a red background and white text for participants with age less than 18, what I will do now is I want to format fields like that for participants that have a bib number smaller than 10. So I don't remember what it's written here, so I simply copy it. And now in the more details for this field, on top, this refers to all fields in the list. I enter my dynamic formatting, but I say if bib is smaller than 10, then use the background in red and the color in white. And now you see, okay, this works quite well, but the bib number is still red because we defined the bib number to show red. Oops, the bib number is here. We defined the bib number to show in red. And this setting will overrule the general settings. So I would need to get rid of the color here. And now it would work. What else can we define in the more details? We can define an HTML link as an expression. So here you will see the example, HTTP url.com/page.php !bib equals and bib. So this would then always be customized per bib. This could work, for example, if you want to link to a picture on a picture platform, or if you have people uploading their approval of a virtual race, for example, in the field virtual upload, then you could also write the field name virtual upload, and then it would link directly to that field. It isn't prepared yet in this file, but I guess you understand what I mean. We talked about the column offset, and the column position is only necessary if you want to design your PDF list. And for the PDF list here, you can provide the exact column positions, but then you need to define that for all columns. So this really only makes sense if you need to have a column exactly at the same place, no matter what text to display, because usually the column width depends on data to be shown. So the column width can be wider, can be more narrow, depending on what to show. Then we have a setting show field only in preview. This will then only show here in the preview, but will not show in a PDF list. This, for example, makes sense as said for the picture or for the HTML link as expression in PDF that would not work, or PDF lists are the official results that you want to print, for example, where you have sponsors on there that you don't want to have that link as an expression, so that you could tick the box to show the field only in preview. The last thing to talk about when looking at the fields and columns is the MyResult responsive design. Today, we know that I think it is around 80 to 90% of participants check their results on a mobile after a race. And of course, a mobile doesn't provide such a wide screen. So with the MyResult responsive design, you can define in which order you want to hide columns if the screen gets narrow. And I have a good example. So this is fields and columns, the overview. what data to show, how to display data. We talked about that. Now we look at the responsiveness. So this is what we will look at. So in a given list, we have a rank, we have a bib, we have a first name and last name, a flag, the IOC country code, the club name, and the final time. And if the screen is wide enough, we can display everything on that list. Let's take this example. So we have the rank, we have the bib, we have the name, the flag, the IOC country code, the club, and the time. But if our screen gets narrower, we might not be able to display everything. And then we can define in which order the columns should be hidden. And how does this work? So we have the three different options. We have hide column first, we have automatic, and we have hide column last. Apparently, the hide column first will hide the column first, and then it will hide columns from right to left. So in this example, we have the flag and the club marked as hide column first, and then it will first hide the club because it is the column the furthest to the right. So let's look at the club and the flag, and if we get more narrow, the club now disappears. So now we don't have a club, now we have the club. Okay, let's go further. And now the country flag disappears. In the next step, once all columns marked as hide column first, it will look at the automatic. And then again, it will hide columns from right to left. So first it will hide the IRC country code and then the bib. Let's check if that works. Okay, the flag is gone, the country code is gone, and the bib is gone. And now we only have those columns that are marked as hide column last. And for hide column last, the logic is a bit different because we say the column the furthest to the right is the most important one. So usually this is a finish time, or often this is a finish time. And then we start hiding from the second furthest to the right, marked as hide column last. So in this case, we start hiding with the first name, last name, then the rank, and only then we would hide the time. But hopefully no one has such a narrow screen that it can't even show the time. So we get narrower and the name is gone, the rank is still here. And now we would have the time, but no rank. So if we look at that file, okay, sorry, this is German. If we look at that file, let's take a look at the output. And this is our overall results, I think. Let's change and show the club as hide column last, just for you to realize what happens. Refresh. And now we would first get rid of the flag, then the country code, then the bib, and then the club. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, the flag is gone, the country code is gone, the bib is gone, as they are marked as hide column last or automatic. And now the club is gone. Okay, it worked, perfect. So this is, we think this is really helpful and really necessary, and this is something you should make sure before you publish results, that the closer or the narrower a screen gets, that you check what fields will hide in which, or which fields will be hidden in which order. Okay, so that was the fields and columns. So the next topic, or the next point to talk about, is the grouping and the sorting. In general, the grouping and the sorting defines what data to group together. So yeah, what kind of which groups to show. This is the grouping, and the sorting obviously defines how to sort data within one group. So let's have a look again at our file. So you see, we don't have any grouping and sorting set up. We only have fields and columns. Okay, let's get rid of all that special formatting, because then it's easier to read. And put everything into the first line. Okay. So the only thing that we have that gives some kind of structure is the headers, but that's all. But now we want to sort data. So let's, for example, sort after last first name, and then we can say sort from A to Z or from Z to A. And now you see, okay, the bib number doesn't play a role here, and then it will sort by last name. Okay, because I sorted after last first name, so maybe sort in the same way as I display data. Okay, we start with bell duck and daisy duck, and so on. So you see, this is from A to Z. The page break is important for the PDF view. We will look at that later as well. And the grouping is, again, something else. So the grouping is kind of a subheader. With the grouping, you create a bunch of participants that belong together. So let's now, let's not, okay, we could sort by club. Okay, first we have those that don't have any club. Then we have those that start for Calisoda striders, then those for Duckburg runs, Mighty Mice, and Quack Quack runners. But now we want to provide a subheader for each club. So we could also say club, but define a grouping for it. And if you have a simple grouping, then it will display it all the time. Here in the preview, you can uncollapse that group, but you see you have a subheader. In this example, you wouldn't need to display the club additionally because you have it in the subheader. But there's two other options. There's also a filter and a filter with ignore. So let's have a look at the filter. How does the filter works? How does the filter work? So with the filter, you receive a drop down here. This is also the same on myresult.com. So this is similar in the preview and online. And now you can either show all, or you can decide to only show a certain club. So you only want to look at the Mighty Mice runners, and then you only get the Mighty Mice runners. And the filter with ignore, if you only have one grouping, doesn't really make sense, but then you also get the option to ignore the club, and then it will not show that kind of subheader. And for groupings, you can also provide different fonts. And the font size, and make them bold, italic, underlined, until you also, again, have some more dynamic or formatting options for the color, background color, the spacing above the group header. And if you have a filter in your grouping, then you can define the pre-selection. So either show all or the first value or ignore. And you can also provide a label for the group filter. Club selection. And then this would show here. So it is a bit more obvious to users what the dropdown is being used for. Okay, this is basically everything you need to know about the grouping and the sorting. But now let's have a look at the final list from our template, because that looks a bit different here. If you have several contests, then it makes sense to first sort by contest. So imagine we have all participants on the list, and first you want to bring those from the first contest to the top, then everyone from the second contest, then everyone from the third contest. So we sort by contest. And then we add a grouping with or a grouping that adds the subheader contest.name. Because we want participants to be able to filter what they want to look at, we say, okay, the contest name is a filter, but it doesn't make sense to ignore the contest name. So that's why we only have it set as a filter, but not a filter with ignore. Then we have male, female. A filter with ignore, because we also want to be able to simply list all participants no matter their gender. In the next step, we sort by the age group order position. The order position is the way you set up your age groups from top to bottom. So exactly the same order as you've defined here, and then provide the age group name. And only then we will look at the status. So everyone with a regular status will be shown on top. Everyone with did not finish, for example, will be shown underneath those that have a regular status. And only then we sort after the finish or the decimal finish time. And how does that look like? Let's ignore the rank column for the moment, because we will look at that in a bit separately. So we have the chip time and the gun time. Actually, this is finish.chip and finish.gun. So we also make use of the splits. And yeah, now we have first our contest, 10K. Okay, they're all in the 10K, but doesn't matter for now. So they are all under the subheader 10K. For gender, we set show all. If you select show all, then it shows all. So it shows the subheader, female and male. But for the age group, we set ignore. And that's why we only have females and males separate. If we show all age groups, then we will also have females, all females, then male, young male, and open. If we ignore the gender, then we have our overall result lists. And as you've seen, the status, they are disqualified, did not finish, did not start in that order, and they are regular participants, or their status is regular. So they show on top, and then they show underneath. One thing that I haven't told you so far when looking at result lists, which I often find helpful. So sometimes you need to double check a few things. So you can open the participants tab here in the side window. And when you click on a participant, it will open that data in the side window. And here you have full access to everything. So here you could then check all the times, lags, results. You could check the history, you could check the detections, and so on. Another quite helpful thing is when you go to the left of the preview. So here under the furthest to the left column, when you click in here, the line will be highlighted yellow no matter where your cursor is. So that way you can much more easily compare data as remembering, okay, now I need to look at row line 10, and then I need to go somewhere else with my cursor. So this is sometimes this is really helpful if you want to compare data, or that way, okay, I want to compare Huey duck with Louis duck, and now I have two lines that I can compare against each other. Okay, so that was it on the grouping and the sorting, but there's one more thing, or actually two more things that are really, really cool features and that work together with the grouping and the sorting. The first thing is the auto rank. The auto rank actually is set up similar to the official rankings. So you have grouping and you have sorting criteria. And remember, grouping, sorting, they should ring a bell because we just talked about grouping and sorting within the output lists. The auto rank looks at all sorting criteria after the last applicable grouping. So the auto rank basically allows a dynamic ranking according to the selection options. If you use the auto rank, but you also use a certificate, for example, or yeah, I don't know, if you use the official rankings or the rankings that you will find under main window, if you use them somewhere else in any output list, please make sure that they are set up exactly like the official rankings, because otherwise you could have some deviations in there. But let's look again at the auto rank. So you see we have in our final results from the template when you create a new event, we use the autorank.p. So if we only look at the 10K, we show all genders and we ignore the age group. And for females, it starts with the first female rank, and for males, it starts with the first male rank. Now we show all age groups, and the ranking dynamically adjusts to the selection options. So now we have again a first rank participants for each category. Now we could ignore the gender. Okay, this doesn't make any difference, but we ignore the gender, we ignore the age group, and now we have our overall results, and still we have a new ranking. And as said, the auto rank always looks at the last sorting criteria. That the last applicable grouping, looks at the sorting criteria after the last applicable grouping. So if we ignore everything, so we ignore male, female, we ignore the age group, and then that way we also ignore the sorting above the age group. We only look at the status, and then we look at the decimal finish time. So everyone who has a regular status is ranked first, and then we will look at the participant with the smallest decimal finish time, and he will always be ranked first. If we show male, female, then of course, this will be a grouping. So if we compare that to the rankings on the main window, you also see we have a grouping 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have the order. This is the sorting criteria. And that way the user can decide what to show, and you only need to publish one list. So this is what we had before the auto rank was implemented. We had one age group results, or one list for age group results, where you have all age groups, okay, with some kind of formatting, but that is also possible for the overall list. We have a separate list for the gender results, and we have a separate list for the overall results. And before we implemented the filter for the grouping, sometimes you could have had one list for the 10K, or basically 3 lists, because you have age group lists, you have gender results, and you have overall results. So you have 3 lists per contest, and imagine you have 3 contests and you have 9 lists. And now you could have all in one. Because participant can choose from the drop-down which contest to look at. The participants or the user can decide whether to have a overall ranking or a gender ranking or an age group ranking. And that makes it much easier and much smoother on myraceresult.com, where you publish your lists, because it's all up to the user and you don't need to maintain a ton of different lists. Any questions so far? I see one question in the chat by my colleagues took care of that. The total count of records in an output list, there's actually one thing, but that makes that possible. But I wouldn't use that in a published list. So if you only want to know, okay, how many sets of data do I have, you can use the position. So there's position 1, position 2, position 3. Position will simply create, okay, it's at far right. We have everything from 1 to 21, and that way I could see, okay, how many are in there. If I have position 1, then it will start counting after after each grouping. Actually, position 2. That way, okay, I could check. There's 7 females and there's 14 males, and so on. Okay, one thing I forgot to tell you about the grouping. Of course, you can also use expressions here. So we have our contest.name here, but I could also say contest.name and contest.length. Just to give you an example, it's not the best example, but just to give you an idea what's possible. Okay, 10K. Okay, let's make it. Simply change the contest name. It's called Duckburg Race contest length, and yeah, Duckburg Race 10 kilometers. And now for every participant, the software will check, okay, how does that expression look like? And everyone who has the same value, exactly the same value, will be listed in here. Of course, to realize this, you could also create a contest attribute, but this was the best example that that popped up. And you can also use a function here. So you could say if blah blah, whatever, that would also work. Or to refer to the question, you could also add a decount here to count how many participants are in there, and then the function decount would return a value that is then shown here in your grouping. One thing that you should also be aware of is if you have marked your event as a test event. So if you don't want to use credits when working online and your participants are garbled by underscores, then the groupings may also be garbled by underscores. Actually, the grouping itself is not garbled, but the value for the grouping is garbled. And then the software might have 3 different groupings, because sometimes it would say duckb underscore RG race and so on. So when you check that, it makes sense that participants are all activated, or that you test that entirely offline, where you don't, or where your participants are not activated or don't need to be activated. Okay, then another great thing that also refers to the grouping and the sorting is the split selector. And the split selector works together with the splits that we talked about 2 weeks ago, I think, in the main window. And the split selector lets the user decide what split to show, and I show you what selector placeholders we have. So the split selector definitely makes sense for live lists if you have not only start and finish, but if you really have a few splits on course. So let's look at the live, the template list. Let's check how that is set up. Again, we sort by contest and group by contest name. We will filter, allow the filter for male, female as well. And then we first sort by selector.positive. That selector is written like that. So we check if, well, let's have a look at the other fields as well first. And then we sort by auto rank and then the display name. So if someone has the same rank, because they have the same time, for example, then it would show the one, or then you would sort alphabetically. In our fields and columns, we show the split name, or basically the split label, by using that selector.label. Label is what you define here under splits as the label. And then we write the chip time and the gun time for the selected value. Okay, so how does it look like? Now we also have another dropdown here on the top right, where by default it starts with the last results URL. So the software always checks, okay, what is the last available split? And that will then be written into the selector. So selector is simply the placeholder. In that case, it would be similar to last split. So for those that are in the finish, it writes the label finish. Those two are only at the 5K, so it writes the label 5K and the respective time. But now I can also check for everyone that started, and then it writes the label started. It sorts them first after those that actually started, and he did not start, so he's listed all the way at the bottom. The chip start time, of course, is 0 for everyone, and the gun time, you see they are sorted after the gun time. I can then also check every available split. So here, this is the split results for the 5K, for the finish. And I can also show everything for the legs that I set up in the splits. So for the leg, for the first 5K leg, Florence Crack Faster won. And yeah, you have that available, and I think it was those two that did not finish the race. So if I look at 5 to 10, they are not here. Okay, it was two different ones, but doesn't matter. So that again allows the user to choose what to show. And as we use the auto rank, again, you don't even need to set up 15 different rankings, so that works all automatically. And for the placeholder, you always need to write selector.label.chip.gun. You could then also use .gun.tod. So that follows the same logic as all other split fields that we looked into 2 weeks ago. If you missed that session, if you forgot how that works, you can rewatch it. It's online in our knowledge base, or you can also search the knowledge base for different fields that you can call. And now let's have a look at a few, or at two different live result lists. They are quite complex, and we will also share this file later on, so you can go through that at your own pace, how they are set up, and try to understand how they are set up. So this is a live result that looks at the last split. So last split, as we discussed with the selector or with the split fields, we looked at that 2 weeks ago. And here you don't have the dropdown, but here you have all participants listed underneath each other depending on their last split. And we first sort by contest. I have the contest name, you know that. And then we sort by the last split order position. Then we have a user-defined field that returns the name of the last, the full name of the last split. Actually, that could be the last split dot label. And then we sort by except start last split dot decimal. That again is a user-defined field, which checks if someone did start or not. And that way we realize this beautiful list. You see for the rank here, we don't use the auto rank, but here we refer to the overall ranking. And that's also why for the 5K, it shows their rank at the 5K split. If we would use auto rank or a live rank, then they would show 19 because they are behind those that are already finished. A different way of displaying results is using the selector. And here again, okay, this is similar to everything that we looked at before. And then we sort by the selector.order position. We again have the last split name full for selector. So this is again a user-defined field. And the rest is actually the same. And all data that is shown here, again, please have a look at that on your own once we publish the record of this session and also the files in the knowledge base. And here we kind of have the same structure as we had before with the last split list, but we can then also simply look into every single split that is available and lag. And I must admit that here the estimated finish time is shown gray. And for those that don't have an estimated finish time, they have already finished. So here we could work with a dynamic formatting or simply show finished already, whatever, to make that clear. But yeah, that way you can easily filter based on the split. Okay, that was it about the fields, the columns, the grouping, and the sorting. But there's more to it, to lists. There's a filter. So sometimes you want to limit the number of records. You don't want to show everyone on the list. Obviously, with a filter, you can define who is shown on the list. And then there's also something called record multiplier. Maybe some of you but now we will, kind of reveal what that's all about. Okay, so let's have a look at our final list again. So the filter is all the way at the bottom. We looked at it already. There's an option to set a maximum number of records. The maximum number of records will then simply cut the list after that number of records. But it will still apply this sorting. So now if we have our final list and we say we only want to show 5 participants, then it would cut the list after minimouse. 5. Now we have minimouse. Now we can change that to ignore, and now we have our overall list, but we always only have 5 participants on the list. Record multiplier, we'll look at that in a bit, because we first want to look at the actual filter. And here you can define, based on the value of a certain field, whom to show. So in our final list, we want to show everyone who has finished equals 1, so who has actually finished, and where the contest is larger than 0. Or the status is larger than 0. So here with the conjunction, we can say either and or. And here it is really important that if you have an or somewhere in there, it will, so this could also be written as finished equals 1 and contest larger 0. Or status larger 0. So either this is true or the whole of this is true. So even if someone has a contest equals 0, but his status is larger than 0, he would be shown on the list. So here it could make sense to repeat contest larger than 0 if you really want to make sure that no one is on the list that has a contest larger than 0. Of course, in here, you can also use a formula. So you could also write, as I just did, you could make it finished equals 1 and contest larger 0. Or status status larger 0 and contest larger 0 equals 1. In that case, I would recommend to put an if around it. So if finished equals 1 and contest larger 0, or status larger 0 and contest larger 0, then return 1, otherwise return 0. So if that filter is true, 1 equals 1, yes, okay, show this participant. 0 equals 1 is false. So this participant will not be shown here on the list. So here you really only need to be a bit cautious with the conjunction when you use the or conjunction, that everything that is above the or doesn't matter for everything that is next or below the or. Okay, now we can look at the record multiplier. So the record multiplier, we have a different event file, because this is in the lab details of a lab race. In the lab race template, we have the lab details record multiplier. And for the record multiplier, what the record multiplier does, it checks a field. You could also write 5 in there. And then it will create 5 lines for each participant. If we write number of records, it will check number of labs, sorry, not number of records, number of labs. Now it will check for each participant, how many labs did he do? So we have a advanced result called number of labs, which is a lab count. So it will return different values. So if someone did 4 labs, the record multiplier would return 4 lines for this participant. For someone who did 11 labs, it will return 11 lines. And how is this set up? So we have a column header. Okay, this is simply a hash. So this should mean, okay, n. So this will be kind of a numbering. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And we have a after lab. And here we call the timing point directly, start-lab.read n text. So text is simply the formatted time. And then for creating the list, all the record multiplier does is in the first line, it will replace n by 1. In the second line, it will replace n by 2, and so on and so forth. And that way it will show the start lab, the first detection or the first read and the first lab in the first line. In the second line, it will return the second read and the second lab. So you see this is the time after a lab, and this is the time of the lab. And that way we can easily set up a list. And if we now say, okay, Donald Duck, to make that even clearer, Donald Duck, he didn't do 11 laps, well, a few less, 6 laps. Then you see now it only shows 6 lines for Donald Duck, and for Daisy Duck, it shows 11 lines because she did 11 laps. And here, another example for the grouping. So we have the bib, then we have 3 slashes, which means, okay, this should be written into the next column, then show the display name, then jump to the next column, and then write the number of laps and the fixed text laps. And that way we receive this, this grouping, or this kind of very subheader. And that was a record multiplier already. The record multiplier also has different purposes, so you can really benefit from that in different ways. It's difficult to give you much more examples, but there is so many ways to make use of it. So whenever you have a field that contains a number, then that will dynamically change the number of lines that are returned for a participant. Okay, last but not least, when talking about output lists, is the page settings. Within the page settings, you define the design for PDF lists, both online and print. So let's say online and offline. And with online, I mean on myresult.com, because you can make PDF lists available online on myresult.com. Then you have a page header and a page footer and a list header and a list footer and a few other settings that we will look into right now. So let's have a look at our final list. No, let's have a look at the overall results. Okay, the overall results, this is how they look like. So we have our contest name, and then we have the participants. Now, if we look at the page settings, or if you click here and click here on the page settings, you see what you can do. So first of all, you can copy settings from a different list. So you don't, if you have 15 different lists that all need to look exactly the same, you don't need to enter the same settings 15 times, but you can easily copy the settings from another list. The page settings, you define the page size. Define whether it's portrait or landscape format. And also you can define the number of columns on your PDF list. If you have more than one column, you can also define the column spacing, so you can play around a bit with the different formatting options. Page margins, quite obvious. Okay, left, right, top, bottom. And then looking at the background design, because that is why many people make use of the PDF lists. You can choose from a design that you design, or from a certificate that you designed in the designer. So here we have a certificate and we have a results background. So the results background simply uses the Duckburg 10K cover to show on top. And here we also see, okay, this is the top, and now we're with the cursor here. So we probably need 1, 2, 3, 4 centimeters on top as a margin. Otherwise, the text would overlap with the cover picture. And that's what's set up here. The top margin is 40 millimeters, which converts to 4 centimeters. So we choose the results background. We want to show the background design at every page. And you can also define deviating cover sheet and a deviating back sheet. So if, for example, I had the case with one race organizer that he hands out certificates or the result list for the awards ceremony. And the speaker or the announcer, he always wants to have a cover sheet, because when he gets 5 sheets of paper in the hand. He wants to know what it's all about. So they simply created a cover sheet. Instead of writing something by hand on the first paper, they created a cover sheet that simply said, this is overall results, or this is age group award ceremony, whatever. And that way the announcer didn't need to think about what is on the list, and it was pretty clear. And for the back sheet, all they did is to say that was it, nothing more. And that way the announcer or the speaker did know, okay, now we're done with this ceremony. So here you can again choose from the designs that you designed under in the designer tool. For the page header, you can enter two different headlines, and again display them either never or on the first page or on every page. Again, you can define different fonts, font sizes, and you can define a color. The headline 1 and 2, they have an asterisk here in the description. Why? So here you can use data fields, a few different ones. But it's important that if you have something that contains the contest in your header, this will only work if here in the bottom left, you only choose one contest. If you choose all contests or several contests, if you have more than one, this will not work. So this will really only work if it is pretty clear which contest to look at. Okay, let's have a look at how the PDF looks like. So we have the page margin set. We say, okay, this is page size A4, portrait format. We have our results background, and we show that at every page. Let's look at the PDF. And this is how it looks like. We have our cover with 40 millimeters margin on the top. This is our first header line, and this is our result list. So now there's a few more settings. You can also call a picture. Let's simply call Donald here, that you want to display. And if you call the picture, that will always be shown here in the top right. So that could be a sponsor. I don't know, different options. I personally prefer to have a design or a certificate in designer tool rather than the picture here. But it's possible to also do it that way. The gray line is this line in here. So if we untick the box, this gray line will disappear. And there we go. The column heads can be either shown on every page or first page never. If we show them never, and you see, okay, there's no columns or column headers. Quite obvious. Then looking at the different records, so you can either show every other line gray, or you can also have a separator line. A separator line is, yeah, simply a black line in between. I prefer every other line gray. Looks cleaner in my opinion, but again, there's no right or wrong, and you can also disable both. And for the records, here you can also define the font size and the line spacing. Here is important if you have a font offline, or now I'm offline, I'm working offline, and now I can access all fonts that are installed on my local device. If you work online, you may have different fonts because the fonts online or online, it accesses the fonts that are installed on our server. If you have a font that is not available online in Result 12, you can message us and send us the font, and then we will install it on our servers, but only if the font is available publicly, or if the font is publicly available. If it is a font that you need to pay for, then we cannot install it on our servers, because once we have installed it on our servers, everyone can access it. Then the page footer. The page footer is repeated on every page. So we have footer text left, footer text center, footer text right. And you see, if I scroll down, this is repeated here. So this is the date, this is the name, and this is the page. As we've set up here, date, time. That really makes sense if you need to print results to get an approval from any official, that they in the end know, okay, this has been approved, or this have been the official results at this point in time. And page/pages, simply that you know how many pages are available in total. Page footer font, page footer picture, similar to what we recently discussed. For the picture, I prefer to have it with a design, because that's much easier in my opinion, especially if you have different sponsors. It's easy to create a bar of sponsors in there and align the text accordingly. The list header and the footer will only show once. So the list header text shows all the way on top. Let's put something in there. This shows once on top of the list, and the list footer. Okay, now we only have one page here. So this, as said, shows once on top of the list, but under the headline, and this will show on the bottom of the list. And that was it on the page settings. Everything else is up to you how you want to design it. Actually, one thing I forgot to tell you is the page break. So the page break lets you define how to break the page if there's a new subcategory. So therefore, we check the age group results. And we want to say, okay, the page break for a new age group, or every new age group, should be shown on a new page. Then we have 3 pages, because we have 3 age groups. We have young man, then the next page, old man, or old male, and old female. The flow simply means, okay, don't do any special breaks. A new column, of course, only works if you have several columns. Keep together will make sure that within a category, there's only a page break if the number of records does not fit on one page. So here, they all fit on one page. So they will be shown on the same page. But if the page break was here, for example, after Velma Vanderdag, then the whole old female age group would break on the next page. And repeat would simply would not keep it together, but show the old female subheader again on the next page. Okay, that was it on output lists. And that will lead us now to the last part of today's session, which is the statistics. So there are different types of statistics. And again, there are some formatting and some page settings that we can call. And for the statistics, we will look in this one here. So this is all statistics that will be created automatically by default if you create a new event. So let's start with the age group statistics, or look at that, because in the end it doesn't really matter so much. So for the statistics type, you have different options. As said, so there's a standard statistics, a participant summary. With the participant summary, that will automatically some kind of summarize the participants. So there's not much more options to choose from other than formatting options. There's 2 event reports for German federations, so we won't look into them. There's result statistics, that is a default set of statistics again, so nothing you can define. And the same for entry fee statistics, with the only exception that you can give different columns. So you can enter a field here that you can compare the entry fee statistics for different contests. And you can count the total entry fees, or have a minimum or a maximum, average, and sum. So different options here. Count would be how many participants have this entry fee. Minimum, the rest I think is pretty clear. So what is really necessary to know when looking at statistics or when setting up statistics is the standard statistics. And with the standard statistics, you have many options. So you can define a row or a data field for rows, and you can define data fields for columns. That being said, in the end, all it does is creating a table with rows and columns, and it will count how many fit in those 2 categories. So in our example, we have age group 1.name for the rows and the contest.name for columns, and it counts because we set the mode to count, and then it counts, okay, how many female 25 to 29 are registered in the 5K. 1, okay. How many female 30 to 34 are registered in the 5K? 2, okay, and so on and so forth. And if we look at different default statistics, we see, okay, the age statistics does not look at age group, but has year of birth for the rows. And yeah, that's basically it. Again, it's really up to you what kind of statistics you want to set up. I can't tell you what you want to know about your event. Country statistics, for example, shows the country, the international name of the country compared to the contest name. Okay, they all come from Germany in this example. But maybe one thing to look at, and this is our online training event file where you registered in. And here, for example, we can compare the country name for those that registered for the English 10 a.m. session. Okay, let's return the English name because that's easier to read. We have, okay, 1 and 0. 1 means, okay, they kind of registered for the English 10 a.m. session, and 0 means they did not register for the 10 a.m. session. So what we will do is we want to apply a filter. So you can, by default, tick a box to filter by only finishes, and then it will refer to the finish result. Or you can, of course, also filter or define a general filter. And here I will say English 10 a.m. equals 1. So I only want to look at those that kind of registered for the 10 a.m. session. And now I see, okay, we should have 10 people, 12 people from Australia, 2 from Azerbaijan, 1 from Belarus, 2 from Belgium, and so on. I see 18 are right now in this meeting. 91 should have been here. So this is a bit, we don't have so many people watching us right now. But this is okay because the session is recorded and some of you may have heard that already. But this should simply give you an idea what is possible. Yeah, and for the sorting, you can either sort by the row field, so then it will sort alphabetically after the name of the row or the value of the row, or sort by value. And here, by default, it sorts from small to large. It is on the wish list to have it Z to A, to have a checkbox or something to sort in the other direction. For the formatting and the page settings, this is very similar to the lists that we just looked at. So you have a headline 1, 2. You can have another header in the top left. You can define the line spacing, the font, and so on. And for the page settings, this is exactly the same. So define the page size, define the page format. The only thing that you can't do here is define a design background. And that was it on statistics. Any questions so far? So I received one question, whether we will also look at an announcer setup with the lists. I can say yes, because we have time. We can also look at an announcer setup. So if there's no questions on statistics or anything else that I just talked in the last 75 minutes, then we can also look at announcer setup. So let's look at the finish line. What we want to know here at the finish line, we assume that there's several contests now, and they can all finish at the same time, but they started at different times. So first we want to sort by contest and group by contest. And then we look at, or then we sort by finish. So everyone who has finished or who's not finished should be shown on top, because we sort Z to A. So finished can be either 0 or 1. Everyone who has not finished should be shown on top. And then we sort by the speaker. This is again calling the split field speaker. Speaker.timeofday.decimal. As they started at different times, it is the time of day is important, because only with the time of day of the speaker detection, you know in which order they really passed the speaker line. And for the filter, we say either those that have a decimal time at the finish, so those that have finished, or a decimal time at the speaker. And here we see, okay, they have finished already. And just to make it even more clear, let's put the speaker time of day up. So Gladstone is on the finish chute. So he has a detection at the speaker, but no finish detection. That's why he also does not have a rank, because the rank is the overall rank, and the overall rank pretty sure has a filter set on those that finished. Otherwise, of course, you cannot have an overall ranking. So he's on the finish chute and he will show on top. And then underneath him, we have everyone else who is already in the finish. And they are sorted. In this example, this fits for almost everyone here according to the finish time, but basically we sort by the speaker time of day decimal from Z to A. So the larger the speaker time of day detection, the higher they are here on the list. So he's on the finish chute, so he will be shown on top anyway. And down we have them. And because he was the last one to pass the announcer and the last one who finished, he's still on top. The two here on the bottom, they have a finish time, but they do not have an announcer time. That's why they show all the way here on the bottom. And now to give you another example, what would happen if Ludwig was still on the finish shoot. So now we would have 2, because he was the last one, he is shown on top, because that's usually the easiest for the speaker to have those that passed last, have them on top. But also or especially for the speaker, there's no right or wrong. Every announcer, every speaker has different requirements. Some want to have as much information as possible. Some want to have as many colors as possible. Some want to have a name, a bib, and a time, and that's it, nothing else, because they know everything already. So especially when setting up announcer lists, please talk to your announcer, because he's the only one who can tell you what data he wants to have. Of course, you can have something prepared and tell him, okay, this is what I usually have, or this is what I usually provide to my announcer. Is this okay for you, or do you have any other ideas? And sometimes announcers are happy if you tell them, okay, I can do whatever you want to. Of course, you need to make sure that you can do that, or tell him what's not possible. But actually, there's you can do a lot with dynamic formatting, with all data that you have available, with different user-defined fields, expressions. You can, as we see here, simply write where they are. You could also display the last split, or already some lag times, depending on your overall setup on site. So talk to the announcer, because he's the only one who knows what data he needs. Another list that we have set up here is for the last finishes. This is much simpler, because we limit it on 5 participants. So this could be a large LED wall, for example, right at the finish line. We filter by those that finished. Okay, the contest, we could maybe get rid of it, because the contest doesn't matter for us. So we simply sort by the finish time of day. Now we only show the name, the nation flag, and the finish time. And this would look like this. And then you could have that posted somewhere on a large LED wall, a large screen, whatever. Because people, when they finish, some may be exhausted, some may not, but all they need to know at the first glance is what time did they have. The rank often does matter. For the top 3, top 10, yeah, for them it may matter. But if you have a mass participation event, in the end, it doesn't matter if I'm on rank 501 or 515 or 612. That really does matter. You could show the age group, or to keep that one as simple as possible, you could also only show the age group rank if they are amongst the top 3, so they know, okay, they may need to attend the age group award ceremony. So far, thanks for watching, and you will see and hear me. Bye-bye.